Spectacular color greeted us on the drive from our home in Colorado Springs through the mountains to meet friends near Rocky Mountain National Park. The autumn colors are beautiful in late September. We stayed at Snow Mountain Ranch, owned by YMCA of the Rockies, and had an amazing view outside our backsliding glass door. Our friends were camping at an RV park down the road, and we filled the week-long visit with gorgeous views of the autumn colors, a drive to Rocky Mountain National Park, which we will showcase in another video, and visits to several small towns. But one particular place stood out: Grand Lake. Not only is there a town of Grand Lake, but a beautiful lake of the same name. One place we visited was the Grand Lake Lodge, built in 1919 and now on the National Register of Historic Places. The lodge's parking lot not only had an antique car, but an antique fire truck, as well as an old wagon.
Wow, that has seen better days.
It's cool to have animals up on the beams.
Oh yeah. I've seen all those.
We ate breakfast there one morning in the Huntington House Tavern just before it closed for the winter, and enjoyed views from the lodge's front porch before heading for a narrated tour of Grand Lake. After driving through town, we stopped at the lakefront, which has a picnic area, ice cream shop, public beach, and museum, the Kaufman House Museum, built in 1892. Our expert tour guide, Captain Rick, kept us entertained with information about the town and lake and residents. I'll share selections of his narration, but because of excessive wind noise, I'll fill in some of what he said.
Anybody who visits Grand Lake has access to our public beach. That is a man-made beach. However, we got 3 natural sandy beaches here in Grand Lake.
Captain Rick said the Grand Lake Yacht Club is the highest registered altitude yacht club in the world. It was formed in 1902 by some Denver businessmen who built the building in 1912.
That is the mouth of the Tanahutu River. Tanahutu translates from native tongue to big meadow, and that's where that river forms, in a big meadow up in the Rocky Mountain National Park. It is one of the 2 rivers that flows in the Grand Lake, forming the headwaters of the Colorado River. And for a unique dining experience, the Rapids Restaurant Lodge is right up there. The one in the middle belongs to a husband and wife. They are both retired gynecologists from Boulder. They built that home in the middle, and they quickly realized that it wasn't large enough for their family, which consists of 8 children and 32 grandchildren. So they had to build a guest house. That's right, that home right in front of us on the shoreline is their guest house. If you're ever curious to what size guest house you need for 8 children and 32 grandchildren, that's the one right there. Now the home up on top of the hill with the peaked roof, that's the former summer residence of the actor Tim Allen, Tim the Toolman Taylor, Santa Claus Movies, and Last Man Standing. He even mentioned Grand Lake in the last episode of Last Man Standing, so that was kind of cool for us residents here. His nickname is Bathers Beach, because back in the day, before there was bathtubs, running water, and showers, that's where the town folk would come down to wash up. There's 152 steps from the top to the bottom, so I suggest you don't forget your boat keys if you want to go for a ride.
The Adolph Kors family used to use this as a lodge where visitors could rent a room. They sold it in the late 1950s, and now it's a private residence.
We're looking at 3 different mountains. Does anybody know what the mountain in the middle is called? Nobody on board? Well, its actual name is Mount Craig, but nobody calls it Mount Craig. Everybody calls it Mount Baldy, because if you look up top there, it is above tree line, above 12,000 feet. Nothing grows up there, kind of resembling the balding head of a gentleman. Now, the mountain to the right of Mount Baldy is Mount Westcott. Mr. Westcott was the first white original settler that ever came to Grand Lake, so he got to name a mountain after himself. That's the one that he picked. Now, Mr. Westcott was never a judge or an attorney, but he liked to be called Judge Westcott. Since he was the first one here, he just introduced himself to everybody that way. Nobody knew any different, so that's what they all called him. So right now in front of the boat, we're looking at Mrs. Finch's Swiss chalet-looking home. Mrs. Finch must be out of town because she usually deliberately, intentionally leaves her boathouse door open for me to talk about her boat. She's very proud of her boat, and if I owned it, I'd be proud of it too, because it's a gorgeous 1939 all-mahogany Chris Craft boat. In my opinion, that home right there is the perfect example of what a Rocky Mountain lakefront home should look like. Another beautiful example of what a Rocky Mountain lakefront home should look like. I could not tell you the value of that home. I just look at all that beautiful rock landscaping. You know there's a pretty penny involved right there. One of the larger homes on the lake, it's 7,400 square feet of living area. Sold that home last year. Anybody want to guess how much they sold it for? How much? 2 million? Anybody else? 5? We're kind of close. $4 million that home sold for. So to put things in perspective, if that home's valued at $4 million, what do you think the one up on the hill might be worth? The Adams Tunnel goes underneath of that stone wall, underneath of that mountain, with the other end ending up in Estes Park in Mary's Reservoir. From Mary's Reservoir, it delivers water to the Front Range of Denver. None of these homes are required to have floating docks, and they never worry about flooding. They completely winterize this home, then they come back. In the beginning of the summer, they open it up, they wash all the linens, they make the beds, they make sure the cabinets and the cupboards and the freezers and the fridge are full of food, make sure the boats are running properly and they're full of fuel. Then that family might come visit for 4 to 6 weeks out of the summer. That family is the Hall family from the Hallmark Greeting Card Company.
This was the very first log cabin built on the lake. The most unique feature of this home is in the little building with the chimney on it. Inside the building, there are 2 wagon wheels. Those came off of the original stagecoach that brought people from Denver to Grand Lake. It was a rather expensive trip. It was only for rich people, and it would take you 3 days and 2 nights to get from Denver to Grand Lake.
If you look back to the right side of the boat, back to Mount Baldy, you see those 2 great big open areas on both sides of Mount Baldy. Well, 30,000 years ago, there was 2 giant glaciers at South Lake, forming the largest and the deepest natural lake in Colorado. They tell me the deepest spot's 303 feet deep. I've only found 270 so far, but that's plenty deep enough to hide the bodies. Like my very first summer here, I was kayak fishing down at the west end of the lake very, very early in the morning. I thought a sea monster popped up next to my boat, but it was a big bull moose with his antlers.
Captain Rick also talked about what it was like to be there when the October 2020 East Troublesome Fire burned about 300 square miles in Grand County, and how Grand Lake Lodge and the village were fortunately spared.
Board last year, took these pictures. She sat down and looked at them and said, "That looks like Alaska. I'm going to tell everybody I went to Alaska." Well, you notice that Lake Granby right now is really low, and it's going to get a little bit lower before it freezes. But probably about the beginning of June and May, when the snow melts start, all that'll fill back up. So by the middle of the summer, that'll be all full. Then the water that we start letting go down to the Front Range from Lake Granby, that'll start dropping. And then it'll just go through that cycle every year, back and forth. But Shadow Mountain Lake and Grand Lake stay pretty much the same. And all of the regulation all goes through Lake Granby.
The boat tour was great. And of course, we had to finish with some ice cream from what some said was the best ice cream place in the town. We followed that with a walking tour of the town, which was established in the 1800s. It introduced us to many interesting buildings and shops, some of which were original, and some newer buildings appear to be built in the same rustic style. No visit to Grand Lake is complete without a short hike to Adams Falls, just outside downtown, so we'll leave you with those views. Imagine our surprise when Ron and Gary showed up in matching outfits. Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you will take the time to like and subscribe to our channel.